In today's video, we're taking a look at an Athletic article with the top 25 names on the NHL's trade bait list according to several other insiders. Could the Leafs be interested in Ryan O'Reilly? Where will we see Vladimir Tarasenko possibly be moved to? Matt Dumba, Joel Edmundson, James Van Riemsdyk, and others are players we're discussing here today. Plus, we have a significant signing in Los Angeles, news from the NHL waiver wire, as well as news regarding the future of the NHL schedule, and more coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade talk to take a look at here today. First up, I want to take a look at the NHL waiver wire. We had a player on unconditional waivers today for the purpose of contract termination, and that player happens to be a young player with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Right shot Finnish defenseman Axel Rindell, who's been playing mostly, it's a kind of a split time between the minors, between the AHL and the East Coast League. Played a very limited amount this year. This was his first year making the jump to North America. He's been playing in Finland. Prior to that, he was a late round pick a couple of years ago with the Maple Leafs. Obviously wasn't finding that the opportunity was really the right fit for him. So they've come to a mutual agreement to terminate the contract. So he'll be basically an unrestricted free agent, can head back wherever he wants. I suspect generally when this happens with European players, they typically are heading back to play closer to home or somewhere in Europe. So we'll see what happens for them. The other spin-off here, the other piece here for the Maple Leafs that's a positive, is it gets them out of a contract. They were at the maximum amount of 50 pro contracts within their organizational depth chart. And, of course, that means they cannot add anybody in without somebody going out. And now they have, it's not a lot of flexibility, but it's a little bit. So if they want to pick up a player, they have that, or sign somebody if they're another prospect or anything of that nature that they're looking to do, then that gives them that flexibility. So there's certainly a positive spin-off, even though one of their prospects has decided to leave the organization and it's not going to work out. Now, we also had a significant signing in Los Angeles just announced a short time ago. Los Angeles Kings have announced that Trevor Moore has been extended on a 5-year contract valued at $4.2 million per season on his AAV. So Moore's been a nice fit in LA. Of course, he was acquired by the Kings from the Maple Leafs a couple of years ago. He was involved in the Jack Campbell trade, which sent him to Toronto. Moore was an undrafted player who's another great case of determination and perseverance and sticking with it. We've seen some other guys like that as well, and he's a prime example. He's actually born and raised in California, so being traded to the Kings was like a homecoming of sorts for him, and it's worked out quite nicely. He had a 40-plus point season last year. He's on pace for 40-some points again this year. He's proven to be a pretty consistent middle six type of winger for LA, and they certainly like what he brings. Not a big player, but certainly plays really hard and produces and fits in nicely with that group, so they wanted to extend him. There have been rumblings about a Trevor Moore contract extension from Elliot Friedman and a few other reporters in the past few days that things were being worked on and appeared to be getting close, and now we have a done deal. So $4.2 million is not bad for a middle six winger who's a consistent performing player for you. So obviously the Kings are quite happy with that, and I'm sure that takes him into his early 30s. Like he's being 27 with a 5-year deal. Hard to say how long his career will be, but it certainly gets him through his prime years into his early 30s. Now on some roster moves, nothing too serious here, but the Penguins have moved Jeff Petrie to long-term injury reserve, so he is going to be out a little while. Sounds like Zucker's going to be out week to week as well. They have called up Mark Friedman as well as Drew O'Connor, so they've brought up a few players. Petrie going to LTIR gives them a little bit more flexibility that way, but it's certainly not good news when they're going to have a key player out. But the Penguins have played well as of late, so we'll see if they can get through this adversity of the injury bug. The Maple Leafs have also sent back Mac Hollowell back down to the American Hockey League's Toronto Marlies. The New York Islanders have officially placed defenseman Adam Pelech on IR as well. Now, of course, he's been injured and out the last couple of games here, but he wasn't officially placed on injury reserve, which they can do retroactively so that he's not on it for too long. But obviously, he's going to be out for a little bit longer than they were kind of hoping for here in the beginning. Kyle Palmieri, who's been injured, is ready to come back as well. So moving him to IR frees up a roster spot, which means they don't have to bring anybody up or move anybody down or do any other roster finagling here to activate Paul Mary. So one player moves out on official IR, one comes off, and we're right back where we were. The Philadelphia Flyers have recalled Ollie Lykesell. He's going to get his first NHL opportunity here, and Tony Deangelo is off the team for a little while on a personal leave. Not sure exactly what's going on with Tony Deangelo, of course. They're not going to give us a lot of personal details, which is really not expected anyway. But we do know that Deangelo has had a tough start to his career in Philadelphia. Now, of course, we know things ended poorly for him with his tenure with the New York Rangers. Ended up getting bought out, goes to Carolina on a one-year deal. Had a real solid year in Carolina last year. It's unfortunate that they couldn't really, make a way to keep that going because it was a good fit. But ultimately, Carolina had the chance to get Brent Burns by moving on from Deangelo, so they opted to go in that market. But Deangelo back to, like a homecoming of sorts, going to the Flyers, and it just hasn't worked out. He was brought in to fix the power play, and the power play hasn't been good, but there's been many things about the Flyers this year that have not been good. Deangelo was one of the top, I believe there's 3 players tied for the worst plus-minus on the team, so he's obviously not doing well defensively, which is really not a huge shocker. Deangelo's never been, your stay-at-home, steady defensive defenseman type of guy, but at the same time, you got to be, having a positive impact on your team. If you're not contributing offensively, you got to be defending well. It's just a lot of things going wrong for him there. So we're not really sure how long he's going to be out or exactly, the exact reasoning here, but we'll see how long this lasts. Certainly not off to a good start with head coach John Tortorella, and we'll see where this goes, I guess. But staying with the Flyers for a moment, there is other news we want to discuss here today, and that's potential change in general manager. Now, local reporter Anthony Sanfilippo, who has really had some good sources with the Flyers and has been a good source of a lot of Flyers news in the past, is reporting that the Flyers are seriously considering a change in general manager. Now, that shouldn't come as a huge surprise. I think it's fair to say that Chuck Fletcher, I think a lot of us thought he was on the hot seat in the offseason, and I don't think the Flyers had a very good offseason. It seemed like a lot of people internally thought a changing coach and some minor tweaking of the roster was going to be enough to get this team to be back and being competitive and doing well again, and it's certainly not the case. John Tortorella has been a fine addition. He certainly instituted lots of hard work and making players earn their ice time. And I think all the things that he's brought is kind of come as advertised, as expected. And I don't really think that it's been negative in any way. I think Torts has had a positive effect there. But the fact is the roster is just not cut out to compete, in my opinion. For example, some of the recent Chuck Fletcher, not good moves, you could say, or, misguided moves, was the extension of Rasmus Ristolainen. I know they paid a pretty penny to acquire him from Buffalo the year before, but I really just don't think Ristolainen's really all that very good of a defenseman in the NHL, and the fact that they extended him on a pretty good contract with, good coin there, I just don't see that making sense. Of course, they signed Nick Delorier to a pretty rich contract in free agency. Again, I understand the desire to maybe add a guy like Delorier and kind of bring in that toughness factor and the guys willing to drop the gloves and, protect your younger players, all that, but they way overpaid him. That's not a role that typically generates that kind of contract. So to me, that wasn't good. And there's others too, but those are certainly a couple of things to look at for sure. Obviously the Flyers have had a bit of a development issue. A lot of their younger players have not really developed into what they were hoping for. So they're going to ask themselves what's going on there. Is this all the players' faults, or is there an issue in their development department? But it's fair to say that the reports here seem to think that there's a real good chance we might not have to wait too long for a change in the GM role in Philly. And there's also rumors from Anthony here saying that they might even move him to be president or move him into a new role. He may not be completely fired from the organization, which to me, I don't completely understand. It's been a train wreck since he's been there. He's just not really, to me, doesn't have a good track record of being a good general manager. To me, this is a guy who, and I've said this before, during the time in Minnesota, he's gotten by on his name. I mean, if his last name wasn't Fletcher, I honestly don't know that he'd be continuously given these opportunities. He certainly has a lot of contacts, a lot of friends in the league. Obviously he comes from a family who's well connected in the NHL, and I do wonder, and I've always said that's probably why he gets the opportunities. It's not really fair. Keeps messing up teams, but keeps getting chances. But fair to say that Daniel Briere, more than likely, in my opinion, would be the next GM in Philly. They've already brought him in and groomed him. He seems to be the heir apparent, so to speak, so we'll see if that moves forward or not, but won't be shocked if we get a change in GM here in Philly in the not too distant future. Especially if they don't see Fletcher being their long-term guy. It doesn't make any sense for him to be the guy handling their activities at the NHL trade deadline. Now, there's also an article today in Sportico talking about the fact that the NHL has plans to make some changes to the scheduling as early as next season to create more rivalry games. So certainly one of the cases discussed was the fact that the Battle of Alberta between the Oilers and Flames, which is a very, a big rivalry series, something that's, a very heated series, well contested. They had a recent playoff battle last year. You want to see more of that. It's really good for ratings, really good for fans, and it's obviously just really fun to watch. And they're only playing 3 times this year, so that the NHL certainly wants to maybe make a few changes to make more of that. The only thing is to get all teams being in all 32 buildings every year, it's a challenge. To visit 31 other places in the run of a season, it's not easy to do that kind of schedule. So I'm not sure how they're going to make tweaks here. But to me, that's as much as that is a bit of a concern. I really think a bigger thing that they need to look at is how they schedule their games time-wise. There's a lot of nights, whether it be on a weekday or weekend, when you get anywhere from 8 to 12, 13 games in a night, sometimes more. And the bulk of them start at the same time, 7 o'clock Eastern. 7 o'clock Eastern time is the prime time. I get that. But can you not stagger these games? Like a lot of other pro sports have staggered games, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes, so that they're not all starting at the same time, hitting intermission at the same time, so that the people who are subscribing to your packages and watching and trying to watch a lot of content and a lot of games can actually get, jump around and watch more games and more of it and get more bang for your buck. And that way, to me, that's a major thing that the NHL has not done that we've seen other sports do, and they need to adjust to that as well. Have a few games start at 7, have a bunch more start at 7:10 or 7:15, then 7:25, 7:40. Like, it's not really that big a deal to have them staggered, in my opinion, and it's something they really need to seriously look at. Now, onto the trade section of the video today. Like I mentioned, there's an Athletic article talking about their new trade bait board, basically the top 25. It's contributed by a variety of reporters, including Michael Russo, Pierre LeBrun, Eric Duhatchik, like a bunch of these guys that are well-connected NHL reporters. And some of the names I want to take a look at here, I'm not going to look at all 25. That would take too long. I may discuss some of the other names over the next few days, but certainly some of the names that are on this list are names that we've already been discussing over the past little while. So there's some obviously that are a little bit different, haven't been discussed as much. And a couple of the big names are in St. Louis. Pierre LeBrun is reporting in this article that he believes the Leafs have internally discussed acquiring Ryan O'Reilly. Now, it doesn't mean for sure they're going to make a big pitch to the Blues to make this happen, but the fact that they're talking about it internally, one of their targets for the deadline, certainly is very interesting to say the least. We know that, Doug Armstrong's not afraid to make big moves. LeBrun references the fact that, even if they're trending towards the playoffs or not, that, Armstrong's not afraid to do these types of things, especially if it makes most sense for the team moving forward. We do know that the Blues are having a very inconsistent season, and a lot of people are just not confident that they're going to get it together on a consistent enough basis to be a playoff team this year. And O'Reilly could be a very interesting guy. I mean, it's only a few years removed from being a playoff MVP, winning the Stanley Cup. Even though he might not be having the greatest season this year, I think in a new rejuvenated opportunity, could find that again. And certainly, if you look at the Maple Leafs and how they're built, I would suspect that they'd be more likely to add on the blue line. But certainly, adding a guy like O'Reilly could be very interesting. Their bottom 6 has not been all that good. And if you get O'Reilly, not that he's a bottom 6 guy, but you're going to have some guys that are normally top 6 guys playing bottom 6 roles, one of the better two-way centers in the league, they could create a potential real solid shutdown line, maybe with a guy like Yarncroke, for example, maybe Engvall or one of the other bottom 6 guys that could really create something there that could be to really improve their overall team defense. Might be an interesting strategy here by Toronto. So we'll see if they make a push for O'Reilly. Vladimir Tarasenko is obviously on this list as well. Of course, he has a full no-move clause and could be a similar scenario to Claude Giroux like last year. The article references the fact that the return on a Tarasenko trade may not be all that great given the fact that he has all the leverage and can kind of determine his own fate and where he ends up. But again, a player who's bounced back, shown he can be healthy, showing he can score and produce again after some questionable years with some shoulder injuries. It's never have enough scoring in the playoffs, and I would suspect there will be interest in another guy who could be moved. James Van Riemsdyk in Philly, another guy too, recently returned from injury, having a decent production year. Final year of his contract, the Flyers are definitely in a spot where they could retain 50%, and he could be a very interesting player. JVR's been around the league a long time. He's still scoring, is still producing, has a lot of experience over the years as well, and good net front presence, good in those in-tight situations around the net. And I still think that there could be an interesting name to watch as we get closer to the deadline there. So watch for JVR to finally make his move out of Philadelphia. Joel Edmundson, another name in Montreal to watch, certainly, and the next defenseman that's most likely to leave Montreal. We've seen them trade a variety of defensemen at the deadline the past few years, like Jerard and Kulak, etc. And Edmundson has been in the rumor mill for some time. He's got more than 1 year left on his contract, so this year and next. So he's not just a rental. Good size, good strength, lots of experience. Was on that Blues Cup winning team a few years ago in St. Louis. Of course, had a long playoff run in Montreal as well. So again, another guy who's not very old, 29 years old, has a lot of playoff experience, could be very valuable. Previously linked to the Edmonton Oilers, and certainly makes sense that he's going to generate a lot of interest here at the deadline as well. And you could also throw in like Matt Dumba on the blue line. Dumba's another player that Michael Russo, who covers the Athletic, the Minnesota Wild articles, and obviously part of this article as well, has discussed in this article that he feels that Dumba's time in Minnesota is definitely running out. He's either traded or he's not re-signed. He is a pending UFA and is not expected to be back in Minnesota next year for a variety of reasons. His play hasn't been the greatest in conjunction with the salary cap. It's very highly likely that Dumba moves on and goes to a new team next year. So certainly look for him to be another piece of as well. I do wonder if Minnesota could try to dangle Dumba to the Canucks for a Brock Besser type of trade. Besser has been previously linked, and it is referenced in this article as well of the hometown team Minnesota being interested in Besser, but of course the salary cap is their biggest concern because of the big buyouts they're dealing with Parise and Suter for the next couple of years. It's going to impact their ability to do a lot. So we'll see where things go. But either way, Matt Dumba's time in Minnesota likely comes to an end. It's just a matter of how things end and where he might end up, and if it'll help bring Brock Besser to the Wild or not. Could be some other subsequent moves that might need to be made in order to make that happen. But let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.